My name is Dr. Justin Alger, and this is the Future College Parent Podcast.
Parents and guardians, the more you can be involved, the better it's going to be for your child. Again, that community aspect is very important because you said we can't do it alone.
Hello, future college parents, moms, dads, and any family member who's helping a student get to college. Welcome to the Future College Parent Podcast. This episode is dedicated to arming parents like you, our original influencers, with free information and resources to help the next generation of students prepare, choose, and finance college. And by college, I mean any and all education after high school or equivalent, and by parent, I mean anyone helping a young human get through schooling towards college. This show is predicated with the belief that anyone can access and pay for college if they want to, and should start preparing as early as the 6th grade. I am your host, Dr. Justin Alger, but you can call me Justin. That voice you heard over the intro music is the guest of episode 10, Mr. Robert Beach, school counselor and Student Equity Action Committee co-sponsor at Lockport Township High School. Robert has a large number of students assigned to him in a massive school district. In this episode, Robert and I discuss how school counselors can help support students in 3 areas: social and emotional, academic, and college and career support. It's very obvious to me how passionate he is about helping students achieve success in these 3 areas, and I hope you enjoy my interview with Robert. Robert, welcome to the Future College Parent Podcast. Thank you for being here and helping future college parents, and thank you for being on the Future College Parent Podcast. Hey, thanks and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin, for having me. Appreciate it.
Great. I'm excited that you're here. So if we could start out, can you please share your role and describe in what capacity you support parents and students on their post-secondary education journey?
Sure thing. So I'm a school counselor at Lockport Township High School in Illinois. We have close to 4,000 kids at our high school. I think we're up to close to about 3,800 to be exact. And I am a counselor for sophomores, juniors, and seniors. We have 2 campuses. We have an all-freshman campus as well as a sophomore, junior, and senior campus. I'm at the bigger one, so I see a mixture of sophomores, juniors, and seniors on my caseload.
Wow. So 4,000 students. And how many students are you responsible for? Or how many students are under your purview or leadership?
Yeah, I think I'm probably around 330 or 340. I think each counselor is around that number. So we have pretty big caseloads, to say the least.
Wow. I mean, at 330, now, do you know every student, or how often do you interact, or do you try to get to know all of the students, or do you try to interact with them at least once an academic year, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. We try our best. We try our best to get to know, every student on our caseload. Obviously, with the caseload of our size, it's hard. It's hard. We do a mixture of individual meetings with kids throughout the school year. We have times where we can put kids into groups and talk to them for whatever topic we need to touch on. So between those couple of things, that we try our best to get to know all of our kids. But in some cases, we only see kids when it comes to registration. If a lot of kids that are doing fine and really don't need any additional support, except for talking about classes and getting through high school. That happens, but we also have a number of kids where we see on a regular basis, depending on their needs. So again, the number kind of varies between counselor to counselor, but to answer your question, we try our best to get to know all of our kids, but it's hard. It's hard with that large of caseload. That's great. And can you share from your journey from high school to college, what informs the work you do now and the way that you advise students? The skills that I learned in high school definitely helped me out on the college level. The writing, the study habits that I developed in high school, those carry on to college. So that was very beneficial for me. In high school, some of the content that you learn in your classes, let's be honest, you're probably going to forget that stuff. If you don't, then God bless you. But a lot of that stuff you may forget, and that's okay. But if you kind of hang on to some of those essential skills, You're going to need those in college. Like we said, the writing, the study habits, the critical thinking, working in groups, working with partners, doing independent work, all those things that you did in high school that you may have kind of rolled your eyes at, or, that you really liked. The skills are really important, so the skills for me really translated to college, which led me to be successful. And then, a lot of those skills I still use today in my everyday work. So, the foundation really started in high school.
We talked about 3 domains or areas in your work as a school counselor that your interactions with students generally follow. And I'd like to speak to each of those, starting with social emotional support. So what does social emotional support to a 10th to a 12th grader look like?
To a 12th grader, so a senior, seniors obviously can go through a lot with this being their last year of high school. So, we definitely see the anxiety. We definitely see the depression that can occur. I would say those are probably the biggest 2 areas that we deal with when it comes to social emotional well-being. And, it varies from topic to topic. Again, seniors are a little stressed about, again, this being their last year of high school, what they're going to be doing after high school, whether it's college or looking for a job. That's probably the biggest area that, we deal with. Coming out of the pandemic, not just for seniors, but all kids, definitely a stressful time, just kind of getting familiar back with a traditional school setting with coming from online learning. Was not an easy transition for a lot of kids. So, we definitely had conversations with students just to kind of help them get back in that traditional school setting, giving them the kind of support that they needed. So with seniors, again, I would say just looking at what's going to happen after high school. Those are a lot of questions that some seniors may have about, okay, what am I going to do? How do I plan for college? Am I going to find a job? What if I don't have the money to do this? Or what if this doesn't work out? It could be a plethora of things, but we certainly try to ease those emotions and help our seniors transition the best that we can.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think it transitions well to our next area, or your next area of academic support. And I know that you mentioned earlier you help support students in their classroom work. And you just mentioned, the navigating these increased expectations or these different expectations of in-person learning. And so what type of ways did you help, or what type of ways do you help students from an academic supports perspective?
Sure thing. Well, when it comes to academics, we do a number of things. Obviously, we're the ones helping students pick their classes for, the next academic school year. So there's always constant planning around that, because we want students to pick classes that are going to help them in potential careers down the road. So, that's one thing that we do as far as academics, and that's a very big and important piece. So when it comes to studying, we help kids, develop study skills, organizational skills. We talk about time management. Those are plenty of topics that we talk about throughout the year. And we can do that individually with students. Sometimes we hold small groups to talk about those things if there are a number of students that may struggle with, organization or study skills or time management. Tutoring is another big thing that we do as well. Kids will reach out to us if they're struggling in the class. So we'll definitely offer, our tutoring options that we have within the district to help them get back on track so they're earning the best grades that they can, And then there's constant communication between students, teachers, counselors, and parents. We gotta work as a team. I can't do it by myself as a counselor. Some kids can do it on their own as a student. Some students don't need that. They need that community. They need that team to be successful. And again, that's us as counselors, that's parents, guardians at home, teachers. We're all working together to make sure that the student is getting their needs met to be successful.
And that's great. So you mentioned that you're you spend time helping students pick their classes and that help them with potential careers down the road. And I think we'll talk about that when we talk about college and career support. But now when you're talking to students about study skills, organizational skills, time management, and tutoring, are you providing the content for study skills, for example? Are you teaching students how to study, or are you facilitating workshops to teach students how to study?
Yeah, so we will provide the content, and we've done a number of things. Whether if it's an individual conference with a student that's really struggling, we'll kind of break down the areas that they're struggling in and really talk with them one-on-one and give them strategies and skills that they need to be successful. We can also do it in the classroom setting too. If we identify a number of kids that may be struggling in a certain area, we can talk to the whole group and kind of give them the skills that they need to, to better themselves in that area. So it's a little bit of both, a little bit of everything, individual meetings as well as small groups or larger groups, whatever is needed at the time.
Nice. And maybe can you give an example of a student who you provided study skills or organization skills or time management, and also in a group or a classroom setting? Of course, you don't have to share any names. young Robert came to me struggling with mathematics.
That's right. We'll go with that. We'll go with young Robert since we used that. Yeah. So little young Robert here, who was just struggling in a number of classes. And after gathering some teacher feedback, I just started to see a common theme. The student hardly has his papers with them, or his folder is just in complete disarray with papers that even don't belong with that particular class. So after gathering teacher feedback, meet with the student and say, hey, what's going on? Student shares, I want to do well. I'm trying my best, but I just can't. I'm just not organized. I lose everything. I put everything in one folder. Half the time the papers are falling out, so I lose them. I just, in my homework, I can't turn it in because I lose it. What can I do? What can I do? So that's when, we come up with some organizational skills here. So again, it varies from student to student. This particular student, we actually created one binder with a folder for each subject within that binder. And then just say, hey, on one side, you put homework that you have to turn in. The other side can be, graded papers. And when you get those, you can look at it. Then eventually you can throw those away. Something that simple, really helped this kid do well academically. He was able to organize his papers, knew what he had to turn in, knew what he had to throw away when it was all said and done. After several weeks, I don't want to say a few weeks, several weeks, we're checking progress reports. The kids' grades are jumping from D's to C's and B's. So we definitely saw an improvement there. Follow with him again and said, all right, the grades looking better. You tell me, what's worked for you? And then he just held up his binder. He said, it's this right here. He said, I'm able to organize my papers. I know what I have to turn in. I know what I don't have to turn in. This has really helped me, so I'm not missing a beat. I'm definitely going to be doing much better. Eventually I want to get to A's and B's. And I said, okay, this is great. So it was very rewarding to know that something like that really helped that student in his particular, semester to where he was performing well in his classes. On a group setting, again, something along those lines, it could be similar, but we just are able to identify more kids that may go through the same thing. And that's when we can kind of hold a workshop or just almost like a classroom lesson, just kind of talking about organizational skills. Okay, hey, what does it mean to be organized? Get some feedback from the students. What does a organized folder look like? Just kind of going over examples like that. And again, kind of setting things up for kids. If we have to create binders for a large number of kids, we can do so. But in some cases, just kind of having those conversations and then following up with the students to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, it helps. it helps. So whether it's on the small scale or on a large scale, it kind of depends on the setting. But, once you get the feedback and see that things are moving in the positive direction, then things are looking pretty good.
What conversations or what types of conversations do you have with students' parents?
Parents will reach out, and many times, like the student, hey, my son or my daughter is struggling in this class. What kind of insight can you provide, for me? So whether it's helping the student directly or kind of giving some items to the parents to help them out as well. So it goes a number of ways. We could hold a meeting within the school, with the parents, the child, and the teacher, and kind of come up with some collaborative effort or plan to help the child moving forward. In many cases, parents just want to know what are the options. What are your tutoring options. Because you have sometimes where students may struggle in class and they're not getting the best grades that they can be getting, but they're not putting forth that effort to go to tutoring or something to kind of better their grade. Parents want to know that information. Hey, what's there? Because let's be honest, parents may ask their child, hey, you're not doing well in this class. Is there tutoring or something available? And what does the child say? Oh no, there's nothing. There's nothing after school. There's nothing before school. I'll just figure it out. Well, and then we get a call from mom or dad or a guardian is saying, hey, is this true that there's nothing after school? And it's like, well, not exactly. We have after school tutoring. There's tutoring during study halls. Prior to the school year, we had a tutoring session in the morning, just talking about my school specifically. So the point is that there's options out there. So, as long as there's communication between parents and counselors, we can definitely provide that information to them so they know exactly what's going on.
But that's great, though, that you get parents that reach out to you and ask you about the resources that you have available.
Yeah, it's really nice when parents do that, and and I get it. Some parents are not able to do that with work schedules and a lot of things going on within the home. But parents and guardians, the more you can be involved, the better it's going to be for your child. Again, that community aspect is very important because you said we can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. In many cases, the classroom teacher can't do it alone. We got to work as a team. So whether it's counselors, teachers, parents, and the student, of course, if we're all working together, the chances of that child being successful is going to be pretty high.
I like it. Sort of, it takes a village. It takes the whole community, as you said. It's a great way to look at it. And let's move into our third area: college and career support. Now, when we talked in our pre-interview, you talked that college and career support sort of start with interest inventories and finding what the best fit is for a student or what the best fit for a student is maybe for career opportunity, or looking at what's next after high school?
Yeah, inventories are a good way to kind of start that process. If you're going to enter the workforce right after high school, that's great. That's awesome. As well as if you're going to college right after high school, you definitely have that right and that choice to do as you please. But a lot of students, they may not be sure as to what direction they want to go in. As far as if we start with college, some students may not know what they want to major in. They may not even know what type of college they want to go to. So usually interest inventory or survey can kind of help just to get that process started. Obviously everything within that survey, you don't have to abide by, but again, it's a good way to get the conversation started and to get things in motion. So we have maybe a little sense of what you like and then what you don't like. Same thing with career. If you take some kind of interest survey, personality survey, wherever it is, you might be able to get a good sense of what might be a good field for you, depending on your skills and your personality. So again, not anything written in stone, but it's a good way just to get the conversation started.
And when do students traditionally take these inventories, or is there a bunch of them? Are there different for different age groups, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, with the inventory, a student can take it at any time. You know, you can start in high school as a freshman. You can take one every year. You know, you can take it a couple times a year. But again, it's just a good way just to see, you know, okay, what are some of your interests? You know, what are some of your passions? What are some of your skills? Also, you can look at, you know, what are some things that you don't like? You know, they definitely give you a good sense of things that might work for you and things that you like, but then you also see the areas that you're not interested in. So you take all that information and put it together, you know, we can start working on the plan that's going to be best for you, you know, once high school is over.
That makes a lot of sense. It's great. So if we have students who decide that they do want to go to college, either a traditional college or a trade school or something like that, what types of work do you do to help students decide? I mean, outside of the interest inventories, but what type of work do you do to help students prospect for what it is that they want to do after high school?
Yeah, so we, you know, a lot of conversations with kids, whether it's individually, in groups, talking to large groups here. You know, in this kind of example, if we're talking about college, you know, we talk to all age groups. I think that's important to note as well. You know, we don't just save things for seniors. You know, we kind of want to get the idea started with our freshmen, with our sophomores, definitely juniors. But then by senior year, you know, we want our kids to have a good sense of where they're going, you know, and if they know what they're studying, that would be great too. So really emphasizing that, hey, this does not have to wait until senior year, or it should not wait until senior year. You want to kind of start to get these ideas rolling now. You know, hey, I know you might be in your second semester as a freshman or your first semester as a sophomore, but it's not too early to really start thinking about, you know, what you want to do after high school, especially if you're planning on going to college.
That's great. So you talked about starting the college planning or the post high school planning early, but there's also opportunities for scholarships that you can begin to apply for earlier before you graduate as well, aren't there?
Yeah, most definitely. You know, scholarships come about every year, obviously, and you know, yeah, some scholarships, you know, you can't apply to until you're, you know, a certain age, but it never hurts to inquire about them early, just so you know how the process works. You know, since I work a lot with sophomores, you know, I tell them, hey, start looking at scholarships now just to see, you know, what's needed to complete the application process. You know, if they're looking at a certain GPA, for example, and, you know, you're not quite there yet, you know, keep that in mind as you're moving forward, you know, to better your grades, you know, something along those lines. And again, I tell them a lot, you know, hey, just check out this website, look and see what has to be done so you're not blindsided when that moment comes and you're not overwhelmed with, you know, what you have to do. You kind of have a good sense of what's needed because you've already done your research.
And that's great. And so taking a look early to see some of the scholarship opportunities and seeing what that criteria is. So then when it comes time to apply for the actual scholarship, when it's go time, you've done your homework to meet the criteria before it's time to apply. And I think that's got to make the application much less stressful if you already know about what's required before you apply.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Once you know, okay, this is what the expectations are, A, B, C, and D. Like you said, you've done your homework and research. You know, you just have more time to prepare for that. So again, it makes the process a little bit easier. And again, just knowing the expectations ahead of time definitely eases that anxiety.
Nice. And you mentioned these scholarship opportunities, but where do I look to find scholarship opportunities? Are there any tools, or how do I find scholarships? I have no clue how I would find one.
Yeah, great.
Or several.
Great question. In fact, I get that question a lot, actually. So, you know, if you were a parent or even a student too, the first place is to start with the high school, especially for parents. Parents are, that are looking for financial aid and really have no clue on where to start. Start with the high school. Start with your child's counselor as like that foundation, because the counselor, in a sense, can be a bridge between, parents, college of choices, the scholarship opportunities, websites that are out there. We hold a lot of information. We may not have all the answers, but we're definitely going to do our best to point you in the direction to get the answers that you need. So start with the high school, start with the counselor, bring your questions to that counselor, and then, you'll get pointed into the right direction where you need to go. So that's one way, websites, there's plenty out there, and I don't want to sound generic or general, but, there's certain websites. One's FastWeb, College Board, Sallie Mae. There's programs like Naviance that students may have access to within their school settings. So getting familiar with that, because they definitely post a lot of scholarship opportunities there. So again, that's kind of tied into that first point of checking with the high school, because the high school may use some kind of platform very similar, or if not, one of the ones that I just named. And, that'll be a great way to kind of jump into that scholarship avenue.
That's great. And so now we've sort of talked about the two of the three areas that I like to cover in the show: college preparation and college finance. Now, what about the college choice process? What type of advice or what type of questions do you field or give to students related to college choice, choosing an actual place to go after high school?
Yeah, that really comes down to, personal preference, and then, financial obligations are very much tied to that as well. So, just generally speaking, we'll start with the money piece. That's probably the biggest piece. Let's be honest. That's going to be the driving factor for many kids when it comes to choosing a college. So, depending on your financial situation, you may want to go to a junior college for your first 2 years and then transfer to a university. Junior college obviously is going to be cheaper than a university off the bat. So if you're looking to save some funds that way, it's certainly a great avenue. We have a lot of kids that do that. They go to our local junior college for a couple of years and then finish out at a university and then come out, very successful. So that could be something to consider if you fit that criteria. Some of the other things is size. We have a lot of students that have questions about size. How big is this school? How big is that school? I don't want to go to a school that's super big, but I don't want to go to one that's super small. I want something in the middle. And it's like, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? So, we definitely help students kind of figure that out, So, the inventories, we go back to that a little bit, where it comes to choosing college. Those help because you can kind of plug in your answers to these questions. Hey, I want to spend this much money. I want to go to a school with this amount of people. The school has this major. I want to live in an urban area. I want it to be diverse. What's the reputation? What are their safety protocols at that school? So inventories can help with that sort of thing to kind of narrow down the search for kids. We tell kids, obviously, utilize inventories, ask your counselor, reach out, ask questions. We try our best to kind of reach out to some of our alum who have been to some of the schools that a lot of our schools, students within the community will go. We try to get them to come back and talk with students about their experience at their school. I think that's just that peer conversation goes a long way, especially if you have a peer who went to the same high school as you and now they're at the same college that you're thinking about going to. Them sharing their experience, that goes a long way. So we try our best to set that up, as much as we can.
Well, that's great. And you bring alumni back and speak to that experience. They sort of have they have way more credibility than you have because they've had that experience and they're closer in age. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, what about, do you refer students to trade schools or any technical schools?
Yeah, definitely. It just depends on what the student is looking for. We have students who are looking to go into the union right after high school. So we definitely can set them up with representatives in whatever field they want to go into. So yeah, we have a number of avenues for students that they can choose, just kind of depending on their path. We have, what's nice is we utilize our college and career center at our high school, and we have a coordinator who can meet with students on a regular basis just to talk about, the kind of questions that you're probing here. Hey, I want to go to a trade school. What are my options? Okay, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Or, hey, I'm interested in going into the University of Iowa. What does it take to get into that school? Let's sit down and talk about it. So again, just providing those resources, really, really helpful.
And that's great. And so I think that I will end on that note. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and providing your perspective. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It means a lot to me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Robert is really humble about the work that he does, and I appreciate his down-to-earth approach of how he meets his students at the level they come to him at. He then provides strategies for them to help themselves to be successful. And there is so much Robert and I discussed in this episode, and I want to share with you 5 things I learned from my talk with Robert. Number 1, there are so many important life skills where the foundation is built starting in high school. These skills include writing, study habits, critical thinking, working in individual and group settings. Do not overlook these skills. Number 2, counselors can provide strategies and content for your student on how to study or gain skills to be successful. Remember the example of young Robert organizing his learning materials to become more academically successful. Number 3, interest surveys and inventories can be beneficial to narrow down interest, passions, and skills. They can also help identify areas your student may not be interested in to get a better viewpoint of their plan beyond high school. Number 4, it never hurts to inquire early and do the research to earn scholarships. Knowing how the application process and criteria necessary to work towards will make it easier and less stressful when that moment comes to apply. Start with your high school counselors to provide scholarship opportunity ideas. They are a wealth of information and can refer you to resources mentioned in this episode. Number 5, to help choose plans after high school, start with the money. Set your budget to inform your college choice. Your student may want to attend a community college to start to save money. Other areas to consider when making post-high school plans may include preference of school size, major, geographic setting, diversity, reputation, and safety and security. You can also seek out alumni of the school to share their experience. Peer conversations can go a long way. What did you learn? Here's your homework. No, there is not extra credit on this assignment. Please head to futurecollegeparent.com where you can access the Future College Parent Network and post what you learned by listening to this episode and engage with other listeners so we can learn together. Also at futurecollegeparent.com, you can access the show notes for a wealth of information on the items we discussed during the episode and check out all of our social platforms. While you're at it, please share the podcast widely with other parents, leaders of activities your student is involved in, and your school administrators so they can share with your school district. You can also let parents know the show is streaming directly from the website and there's no need to download anything. Just point your browser to futurecollegeparent.com and enjoy. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms as well. I want to thank Robert for coming on the show. Be on the lookout for a new episode on Wednesday, June 29th, and continuing Wednesdays every 2 weeks after. Thanks for listening to the Future College Parent Podcast.